It doesn't matter. Today we're going to read Lord of the Rings, pages 1 and 2. This is The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. See, that's pretty cool. It's a book. Many of you have heard of what that is. This is actually really cool. Here's the actual poem. 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky. 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone. 9 for mortal men doomed to die. 1 for the dark lord on the dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all. 1 ring to find them. 1 ring to bring them all and in the darkness bind them in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. Chapter 1. A long-expected party. When Mr. Bilbo Baggins of Bag End announced that he would shortly be celebrating his 11th birthday with a party of special magnificence, there was much talk and excitement in Hobbiton. Bilbo was very rich and very peculiar, and had been the wonder of the Shire for 60 years. Ever since his remarkable disappearance and unexpected return. The riches he had brought back from his travels had now become a local legend, and it was popularly believed, whatever the old folk might say, that the hill at Bag End was full of tunnels stuffed with treasure. And if that was not enough for fame, there was also his prolonged vigor to marvel at. Time wore on, but it seemed to have little effect on Mr. Baggins. At 90, he was much the same as at 50. At 99, they began to call him well-preserved, but unchanged would have been nearer the mark. There were some that shook their heads and thought this was too much of a good thing. It seemed unfair that anyone should possess, apparently, perpetual youth as well as reputedly inexhaustible wealth. It will have to be paid for, they said. It isn't natural, and trouble will come of it. All right. Let's press start. Load game. That was all just the first paragraph. But so far trouble had not come, and as Mr. Baggins was generous with his money, most people were willing to forgive him his oddities and his good fortune. He remained on visiting terms with his relatives, except of course the Sackville Bagginses, and he had many devoted admirers among the hobbits of poor and unimportant families. But he had no close friends until some of his younger cousins began to grow up. The eldest of these, and Bilbo's favorite, was young Frodo Baggins. When Bilbo was 99, he adopted Frodo as his heir and brought him to live at Bag End, and the hopes of the Sackville Bagginses were finally dashed. Bilbo and Frodo happened to have the same birthday, September 22nd. "You had better come and live here, Frodo, my lad," said Bilbo one day, "and then we can celebrate our birthday parties comfortably together." At that time, Frodo was still in his tweens, as the hobbits called the irresponsible 20s between childhood and coming of age at 33. 12 more years passed. Each year the Bagginses had given very lively combined birthday parties at Bag End. But now it was understood that something quite exceptional was being planned for that autumn. Bilbo was going to be 111, 111, a rather curious number, and a very respectable age for a hobbit. The old Took himself had only reached 130. And Frodo was going to be 33. 33, an important number, the date of his coming of age. Tongues began to wag in Hobbiton and Bywater, and rumor of the coming event traveled all over the Shire. The history and character of Mr. Bilbo Baggins became once again the chief topic of conversation, and the older folk suddenly found their reminiscences in welcome demand. No one had a more attentive audience than old Ham Gamgee, commonly known as the Gaffer. He held forth at the Ivy Bush, a small inn on the Bywater Road, and he spoke with some authority, for he had tended the garden at Bag End for 40 years and had helped old Holman in the same job before that. Now that he was himself growing old and stiff in the joints, the job was mainly carried on by his youngest son, Sam Gamgee. Both father and son were on very friendly terms with Bilbo and Frodo. They lived on the hill itself in number 3 Bagshot Row, just below Bag End. A very nice, well-spoken, gentle hobbit is Mr. Bilbo, as I've always said, the Gaffer declared, with perfect truth, for Bilbo was very polite to him, calling him Master Hamfast, and consulting him constantly upon the growing of vegetables in the matter of roots, especially potatoes. The Gaffer was recognized as the leading authority by all in the neighborhood, including himself. But what about this Frodo that lives with him? Asked old Noakes of Bywater. Baggins is his name, but he's more than half a brandy book, they say. It beats me why any Baggins of Hobbiton should go looking for a wife away there in Buckland, where folks are so queer. And no wonder they're queer, put in Daddy Twofoot, the Gaffer's next-door neighbor. If they live on the wrong side of the Brandywine River and right agin the old forest, that's a dark, bad place, if half the tales be true. You're right, Dad, said the Gaffer. Not that the brandy bucks of Buckland live in the old forest, but they're a queer breed, seemingly. They fool about with boats on that big river, and that isn't natural. Small wonder that trouble came of it, I say. But be that as it may, Mr. Frodo is as nice a young hobbit as you could wish to meet. Very much like Mr. Bilbo, and in more than looks. After all, his father was a Baggins. A decent, respectable hobbit was Mr. Drogo Baggins. There was never much to tell of him till he was drowned. Drowned, said several voices. They had heard this and other darker rumors before, of course, but hobbits have a passion for family history, and they were ready to hear it again. Well, so they say, said the Gaffer. You see, Mr. Drogo, he married poor Miss Primula Brandybuck. She was our Mr. Bilbo's first cousin on the mother's side, her mother being the youngest of the old Took's daughters, and Mr. Drogo was his second cousin. Well, that's all for today. That was pages 1 and 2 of The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien, read by me. Do you want to load the saved data? Yes. So we introduced the characters, Frodo and Sam's dad, and Frodo's dad. And they live in a place in the Shire. And the previous book, The Hobbit, was published in 1937. A story written for his boys. He had conceived Middle-earth in 1919. It's the 100th anniversary of that event, when J.R.R. Tolkien seriously began to work on the history of Middle-earth, which of course led to great things. And he used those notes throughout the writing of all the Middle-earth tales. There's more than Lord of the Rings, as you know. There's other stories, other books. He was a prolific writer. He also painted when he was young. And interesting to note, he drew the map before he wrote the story. Alright, thanks for watching my Lord of the Rings segment today. Until next time, I was thinking of just doing a page a day for the rest of my life.